So, what is the deal with RPGs and churches? It seems in every RPG, especially JRPGs, some large religious organization is the overarching threat or source of corruption, from which half the bad things in the world sprout from. And you better believe that if they have a central figurehead with a title like Praetor or Bishop, then that character is going to be a total zealous lunatic. On that note, Fodlan is a continent overseen by a legitimate organization called the Church of Seiros that seeks to protect the goddess-given land of Fodlan from outside threats, who would only wish to sully the holy grounds that the goddess gave her life for. Also, Edelgard did nothing wrong, Dimitri is a perfectly stable person, and Claude in Three Houses is an actually interesting lord. Among other things that are wrong, the Church of Seiros is mentioned almost every 5 seconds in the Fodlan games. You quite literally cannot go a single support conversation without someone, anyone, referencing how their life was made worse by either the church directly or indirectly via the crest system that they kinda sorta encourage. And, well, yeah, they definitely deserve it. A central religious organization that has repeatedly enforced its will over an entire continent, outlasting and outperforming every single nation while creating branch churches to continue exerting its control over every country, all the while knowingly spreading a false history and teachings that give an excuse for a noble system built around eugenics and the blood of a dead race. Sound like fun? If so, come with me into the distant past so I might fully explain how we reached this point. Once upon a time, a great godlike being called the Sothis, appeared in Fodlan and began spreading life and goodness and all that jazz, which is possibly propaganda. It's been long enough that we don't actually know. Not even Sothis knows, I don't think. Either way, Sothis starts sharing these gifts with the people of the continent, the Agarthans, who develop into an advanced civilization under her care. At the time, she creates a race of children to be in her image. These were the green-haired Nabateans, who all could transform into giant dragon-like creatures. Eventually, war broke out, as it always does. We don't know why or how, but it started. According to Rhea, it's because the Agarthans believed themselves superior to Sothis as they had developed technology. According to the Agarthans, their way of life and their own gods were quote-unquote destroyed and subsumed by Sothis when she and her Nabateans started to arrive. Neither are necessarily flawless sources. The war dragged on for an unknown amount of time, but the Nabateans and whatever humans fought with them ultimately won, but the damage had been so immense that Fodlan itself was dying. Sothis used the last of her strength to heal Fodlan and fell into a deep slumber. Somewhere around this time, she created one of her youngest children, Rhea, or Seiros. We don't actually know if her name was originally Seiros or Rhea, but we'll just go with Rhea. For an indeterminate amount of time, Sothis slept in Xanadu, where a city of the Nabateans gathered. Most Nabateans lived in and around Xanadu, with a few scattering about to other points of civilization across the continent. The Agarthans were still alive, however, and by now they had descended beneath the earth to avoid the wrath of the Nabateans. Agartha was officially dead. Now they were those who rave in the dank. These who samba in the dark reached out to a human from the north, a bandit named Nemesis, who had him sneak into Xanadu to steal the body of Sothis. Somehow, he did this without getting murdered by the city of dragon people, and he was rewarded exceptionally. From Sothis's spine, they made the Sword of the Creator. From her blood, they infused Nemesis with the Crest of Flames, which gave him strength and longevity. And her heart became the creststone that powered the blade. Once more, Nemesis was sent with his bandits to attack Xanadu, and proceeded to genocide the Nabateans with the body of their own mother and/or god. I'm just gonna let that one sink in. With countless Nabateans dead, Nemesis dragged their bodies off so even more Monster Hunter weapons could be made, and his lieutenants could be infused with similarly powerful crests. However, unfortunately for the spooky, scary Slitherers, they missed Rhea, and now she had a tragic backstory, which means she's a protagonist now. Gathering what remaining Nabateans she could find, those being Keyhole, Sethline, an unnamed Nabatean woman who was Keyhole's wife and Sethline's mother, Macule, Indek, and whoever the 4 apostles were, my money is on ex-Nemesis bandits that felt bad about what they did and the Nabatean blood in their veins. This is based on Seth's dialogue and its support with Yuri. Anyway, they went to the city of Enbar and founded the Adrestian Empire under the newly declared Church of Seiros, who was Rhea. Rhea crowned Emperor Wilhelm I and gave him some of her blood, giving him the crest of Seiros and officially establishing an oath between the new Church of Seiros and the descendants of Wilhelm. An oath that I'm sure will never, ever be broken. We don't know what Rhea and Wilhelm's relationship was like, but sure enough, they appear to have been close. Others would take the blood of the other saints, creating houses around their crests. Unlike the northern armies of Nemesis, though, they lacked the hero's relics made from the bones of, well, people. Instead, Macul somehow created the sacred weapons. Whatever magic he used is unknown, but it gave the armies of the Church and the Empire a way to bridge the gap between Nemesis, at least a little bit. The war between the two would go on for, as best as we can tell, over a century, with both Nemesis and Wilhelm's secret backers fighting each other too. By this point, the dubsteppers of the deep are out in the open, fighting alongside their pet projects, led by the enigmatic Epimenides, although he is a conversation for another day. To make a long and largely vague story short, the two armies finally face off at the Tailtean Plains, where Seiros defeats and kills Nemesis in combat, splintering the Northern Kingdom and ensuring the dominance of the Church. The new Central Church's first action was to start co-opting the history to better establish peace. For starters, they maintained the older stories of Nemesis being a just king, while adding that he fell to dark gods and had to be put down, thus preventing too much cognitive dissonance between the current population of his old kingdom and the new regime. Furthermore, they erased the Nabateans entirely, as well as anything from before the massacre of Xanadu. While the 10 elites are hunted down and their clans are spared, the Church starts to set up near the old site of Xanadu, in a place now called Garreg Mach. At one point, the basement dwellers, currently leaderless due to Epimenides' sudden death, decide to fire off their intercontinental ballistic missiles at the monastery. Don't worry about that. However, the missiles appear to be diverted due to the lingering power of Sothis over the area. Also don't worry about that. This sent them a ways north and east of the monastery to a nearby valley called Aolel, proceeding to nuke the place and forever cause the area to burn with magma ever since. Maybe worry about that one. After this event, the Church would not directly be confronted by the Serpent Society for several centuries. Instead, they'd begin working in the background. They would instigate a rebellion in the north, which the Church would have to put to rest by legitimizing the Holy Kingdom of Fargus under the Church's peerage. They likely orchestrated a war of succession in the kingdom, which led to the formation of the Lesser Alliance, further dividing the continent. All the while, the Church seemingly had no idea any of this was going on, except for some vague hints. Likely since Seiros, now masquerading as, herself, was busy creating homunculi in which she transplanted the long-dead heart of Sothis in order to resurrect her from the ether. You know, Church stuff. She made several of these over the centuries, all of which failed to manifest Sothis' presence. It didn't help that she had tried a similar thing before with a magic cup and the 4 apostles. That one likely ended with the summoning of a ground beef dragon. Long story, play the DLC. Needless to say, Rhea was up to some nonsense all this time, and woefully ignoring the brutal enforcement of the crest-based nobility that generation after generation the people grew less and less favorable towards. Almost everyone by the time of the Fodlan games has some story about how the society of Fodlan has negatively impacted their lives. Unless you're Laurens. Ingrid, Sylvain, Demetres, Mercedes, Lysithea, Marianne, Edelgard, Dorothea, Constance, Bernadetta, Caspar, Hanneman, and many others all have experienced some kind of tragedy or injustice in their lives due to the effect crests have on society, further reinforced by the explicitly hypocritical doctrine of the Church of Seiros, which effectively is the 10 Commandments with the addendum afterwards that says, by the way, it's okay to do any of what we just said was bad if it's in service to the Church. And who is doing these things in service of the Church? Why, the Knights of Seiros, of course, the personal military arm of Rhea, dedicated to her and made up of the best trained, most elite soldiers on the continent. When the kingdom descends into chaos after the death of the king and many of their best knights, the knights begin enforcing law and order in place of the Church, which gives them an excuse to bring in suspected enemies of the Church for execution. Were said enemies actually planning on assassinating Rhea? Yes, but they still use the pretense of restoring order to judiciously take out perceived threats to the central church. While the knights often act in ways beneficial to others, it's important to note that at the end of the day, Rhea is their leader and commander. She says jump, they say how high. She says run a mile, they take 2. She says light the city ablaze. They say oil or gasoline. Speaking of oil, the church has a nasty habit of technological suppression alongside historical revisionism. Things like telescopes, autopsies, and oil all became stifled and labeled as possibly dangerous to the continued dogma of the scripture. That said, when it comes to this point, there are some potential silver linings to the church's actions. Manuela is shown to have performed autopsies, there are lenses used on magic orbs, and some kind of explosive is used by battalions in battle. Of course, there are alternative explanations for this. One option is that these things used to be banned and later became allowed. That's the simplest. The more complicated answer is that maybe Fodlan just has alternative options for these things. For example, maybe spyglasses that aren't able to be used as telescopes are allowed. Maybe autopsies can be performed with magic, as the Shadow Library suggests. And maybe some other explosive material is used for these devices, such as alcohol. At the end of the day, we don't know. What we do know is that Rhea does not care. If I had to guess, most of these bans were done superficially while Rhea focused her attention elsewhere, as her biggest problem has always been her negligence to the continent she holds sway over. She keeps the world in a state of stasis. She doesn't agree with the crest system necessarily, but she uses it to prevent chaos and change. She doesn't like sending the people she has taken on as children to die, like Cyril or Catherine. She doesn't hate outsiders, her treatment of Shamir and Cyril proves that, but the less unknown variables in Fodlan means less potential for change. This leads to her method of stagnation within Fodlan, a desire to maintain a status quo for as long as possible so she can finally return her mother to the world, an act she believes will fix everything. So she will lie, she will suppress, and she will kill all for the sake of the coming paradise. The day her mother returns and she can have a family again. We see it with how she treats those nearest to her. Aelfric and Citri were her children, Sedith and Flayn are family, Cyril and Catherine are her wards, and she's the mother of all Fodlan, being the mother she never truly had. There is only one example of what the world would become under a sole Church of Seiros authority, Silver Snow. When all other nations collapse without leadership, the Agarthans are dealt with, all of them, definitely. And Byleth just got the approval of the actual Seiros to become the new God Emperor of mankind. But there is a very big set of issues to be dealt with. The first is that all the former power structures, save the Church of Skeletons in the closet and people in the basement, are gone. Meaning the Empire, Alliance, and Kingdom all have to get used to being directly owned by the Central Church. The Resistance Army was essentially a rebellion from within the Empire itself, so naturally there will be some tension between the folks like Ferdinand von Eyre, who would be taking the reins of the Empire post-war. Rhea is no longer in power, and if you don't boost those support points, she's possibly dead. So everyone really will be looking to Byleth to be the unifying figure of the continent. Not even Claude being there for 5 seconds and disappearing like in Verdant Wind. We're stuck with the cardboard queen. If Rhea is still around, she comes to the millennia-long awaited realization that maybe, just maybe,
what if I'm the monster?
Epic is a great musical series, check it out. Rhea's breakdown only exists in her S support, which is a writing failure in of itself, but it at least shows her admitting and accepting that her actions had horrific consequences, and that she's unfit to lead. Better 1,000 years later than never. With her grief-stricken mind and the high chance of them revealing the broad truth to the public, unless you assume Byleth learned nothing and starts suppressing the truth again, the entire continent will be experiencing a mass case of cognitive dissonance, where everything they once believed to be true is a lie. It's one thing for Edelgard to conquer the continent and tell everyone the church was bad. It's one thing for Claude to set up the one kingdom of Fodlan and disseminate the truth. It's a whole other thing for the church to seize power, establish a kingdom with an actual divine right to rule, and then reveal the true history of Fodlan and crests. Did Rhea do it out of a deep, depressive state of survivor's guilt and or wanting what's best for the continent? Yes. But you know who else did that? Dimitri, Edelgard, Claude. They all have their own problems, as you likely know by now. In fact, if you took the problems of all three and compounded them together, you'd get Rhea. Dimitri's survivor's guilt and violent mood swings, Edelgard's utilitarianism and lack of self-reflection, and Claude's conniving scheming and feelings of being an outsider, all put in a blender and given 1,000 years to ruminate. See, it's like poetry. It makes me incessantly angry when I don't understand the rhyming scheme, and then feel like an idiot when I realize it was an unconventional style. What am I talking about? Right, My point is, Rhea is the architect of the current state of Fodlan, and of the state it enters into in Silver Snow. However, Rhea is an absolute travesty of a person, with more emotional scars than the whole main cast combined. The world she created was built around her warped and ultimately barely successful plan to restore Sothis to the world. In fact, the only reason Sothis actually manifested in Byleth was by complete accident, which is really just a microcosm of Rhea's ability to lead Fodlan, casually stumbling her way through and only really having it halfway under control. But hey, finally got rid of those who stalk in the back rooms. Probably. I guess Nemesis didn't wake up, so you got that to look forward to in the future. Have fun. In conclusion, Silver Snow remains my personal favorite route, even if I know Azure Moon is objectively the better written one. However, as I stated in the very first video of this little series, the first route you ever play in this game tends to color your view of all others. And as I started out playing Crimson Flower and Silver Snow at the same time, it resulted in me seeing Fodlan in a very particular way. I really do love the world of Fodlan, and the mess that the Dragon Pope made it only enhances the reality. While Claude, Dimitri, and Edelgard's stands fight each other ceaselessly over which of their preferred characters are the bigger war criminals, I shall stand beside my fellow Rhea allies in perfect harmony as we all agree that she is the biggest war criminal. Thank you, as always, for watching. Before I go, I just wanted to give a huge shout out to all of you who engaged with the polls I put up between the last video and this one. Be assured I am working on what you all asked for, although it will take time and I simply ask for your patience. We are closely approaching the 1,000 subscriber threshold, which is incredible for me to even think about. You have all just been remarkable with the engagement, even with the occasional disagreement. After all, no matter what you comment, you still feed the algorithm. Seriously though, like, comment, and subscribe. I've got both YouTube memberships and Patreon if you feel so inclined, but no pressure, really. As always, I am the Hearth Guy, and I will see you all next time, around the hearth. I swear, Talus, you guys just suck at your job, don't you? You can't even manage to summon Nemesis in any route except Verdant Wind. Really? At no other point would the undead army led by the god-slaying King of Myth be useful to you. What is wrong with you? What is wrong with all of you? I hate you all so much, and I hate the stupid name Hubert gave you.